We start our story with Dan. He is a brilliant car salesman. He wins Employee of the Month every single month to the point that he gives it away to his quirky friend, Hal. Today is a happy day for Dan because it is his wedding anniversary. Dan has a lovely family. His wife, Jessica, is bored with their routine life. His son, Kyle, is obsessed with video games, so much that Dan banned him from playing. His daughter, Nina, is so in love with her boyfriend, Trevor, that she is changing her university just to be with him. And there is the baby, Maxie, whom they can't find anyone to babysit. Dan asks Kyle to watch his little brother so he can go out with his wife, but he refuses. In the end, Nina is forced to spend the day with the baby. Kyle goes out to hang out with his friend Samir, but in reality, he is going to rent his gaming room because Kyle is a Valorant streamer. The important thing is that Dan and Jessica go out on a romantic date for their anniversary. They go to the amusement park where they first met 18 years ago. Jessica wants to renew their life and travel, but Dan is a routine person who loves repeating this visit every year. At the end of the day, Dan kisses her, but a group of bullies takes a photo of them. When he asks them to delete the photo, they refuse. The bullies saw that Dan was a weak person, so they went too far with him. They posted the photo on the internet and dumped a drink on him. The strange thing is that Dan didn't take any action, and he went back home with Jessica. Jessica was upset about the situation because she was waiting for a reaction from Dan. At home, Dan is upset because of what happened, but he gets over it quickly. He goes in to change the baby's diaper in a fast and precise way, as if he were an expert. After that, he returns to apologize to Jessica for the day and promises he will make it up to her. The next day, we see Jessica training in kickboxing. She meets a woman named Gwen. Unfortunately, Jessica hits her by mistake. This leads them to get to know each other better. Meanwhile, Dan is at the market shopping with the baby, but we notice that someone is watching him. Dan tries to avoid this person, but it is no use. The person attacks him and tries to kill him. But we discover that Dan is a highly skilled fighter. He manages to defeat this ninja without even putting his son on the ground. Well, the baby is actually enjoying it. Dan goes home quickly and presses a secret button. It opens a hidden safe under the stairs. In that safe, there is a bag full of weapons and passports for the whole family. After that, he calls Augie. He asks him for new passports because his identity has been exposed. We discover that Dan is a former contract killer. He used to work for the government, and he has enemies who have been trying to kill him for 18 years. Dan prepares everything and goes to gather his family to travel and escape the city. He goes to the school and pays $100 to Nina's friend so she can tell him where she is. Nina feels embarrassed by her father and is annoyed that he visited her at school, but he doesn't seem to care about her feelings. He takes her and goes to look for Kyle at the chess club, but of course, he isn't at the chess club. He is in his friend Samir's gaming room. Dan gathers the kids and tells them they are going on a trip. Even though they refuse, there is no time for arguments. Dan spots a car watching him and is certain that his family is in danger. After that, he goes to Jessica at her clinic. He asks her to get ready because they are going on a trip. Even though Jessica always wanted to travel, she is hesitant. But Dan uses his sales skills to convince her to go. And indeed, Jessica agrees. Before they leave, he sees the car that has been tracking him. But with great skill, he pulls out behind a bus to lose the trackers. However, they show up again. Surprisingly, Dan manages to escape them without letting his family feel that they are in danger. They arrive at his workplace and he quickly locks the gate. He realizes that these people are tracking his car. So he enters the workshop and lifts the car with his family inside to remove the tracking device. After that, he goes and plants it on Hal's car and asks him to drive at high speed. This is to distract the pursuers. The plan actually works, and the people tracking Dan take off after Hal, and Dan heads on his way to Las Vegas with his family. Dan notices that his family is using their phones, and he is afraid that the pursuers will track their location because of them. So he collects all the phones and tells them that the trip will be device-free. And that's not all. He throws their phones into the river. He tells them, "We will rely on maps and old-school methods for navigation." After that, he goes to a travel agency and asks them to book the most luxurious hotel in Las Vegas. At that moment, the family forgets everything that happened, and they become happy. Meanwhile, we see McCaffrey, the person trying to kill Dan. He reaches his house and finds out that his son is a famous streamer, and they track his location. Kyle talks with Nina about her old personality, the one that was completely destroyed because of Trevor's presence in her life. A few moments later, they see an admirer who asked him for a photo. Dan goes into the bathroom and practices how to confess to Jessica about his true identity. After that, he comes out to see Kyle with his admirer and is impressed by his son. But when he learns that he is famous and that the girl will post the photo on the internet, he decides to change the hotel. While they are on the way to another hotel, he sees a group of bikers watching him. He takes advantage of his family being asleep and prepares his gun. Despite the intense chase and the shooting at the bikers, his family remains asleep. The only one awake is baby Maxie, who is enjoying all of it. He even helps him and hands him his milk bottle to use as a weapon. Dan finally gets rid of the bikers. At that moment, Jessica wakes up, but he tricks her and tells her it was just a small bump. The next day, the family wakes up to find themselves in Iowa, near the university that Nina wants to join with Trevor. Nina asks them to visit the university, and despite the mother's objection, they give her a chance. The university is vibrant, and it has many parties. Jessica decides to go back to her college days after being provoked by one of the students. She does cheerleading moves and drinks beer from the keg, to the point that she even impresses Nina herself. A little later, Dan spots a strange German man at the university. He suspects he is an agent working for McCaffrey. He tries to get information from him without Jessica noticing. When he finds her focusing on them, he starts speaking German, so she won't understand what he is saying. But in the end, Dan discovers that he is just a German employee who has nothing to do with McCaffrey. However, the real agent arrives moments later and attacks him. Dan gets into a fight with this person in the chemistry lab. On the other side, his family is taking a tour of the university. After Dan finishes with the agent, he returns to his family as if nothing happened. Nina decides to visit Trevor. She discovers that he is cheating on her with a college girl. She confirms everything her family said about him and realizes that he is just a manipulative person. Dan sees her crying and tries to comfort her, but she doesn't need lessons from her father right now. So he decides to teach her some martial arts moves to use against Trevor. Nina returns to Trevor's room, uses those moves, and knocks him to the ground. After that, she films him screaming like a little girl. The family gets back on the road again. Nina is driving the car and thanks Dan for always being by her side. She explains to him that she intends to enter the university she chose from the beginning and return to her journalism career. Finally, the family arrives at a hotel in Colorado. Jessica and Dan finally let themselves go. Jessica is impressed by Dan's new personality, but she still doesn't know anything about his true identity. The next day, Dan contacts Augie to receive the new IDs. The only problem he faces is that he still hasn't confessed everything. Dan goes to the meeting place, and we discover that he stole the phone he made the call from. The first one from the family to show up is Kyle. They talk about video games. Dan learns that Kyle loves his persona in the game and streaming because he is bolder, more famous, and better. But Dan wants his son to return to his normal self. Kyle challenges him to play a shooting game. If he wins, he will allow him to return to gaming. If he loses, he will return to his old personality and they will play ball together like before. Kyle thinks he will win easily, but he doesn't know who he is dealing with yet. Dan defeats him with total ease. The family gathers and sets off again, but without Dan confessing. Finally, they arrive in Las Vegas. They discover that Dan has booked a massive suite, and they are completely dazzled. Dan goes out to meet Augie and picks up the new IDs and travel tickets to Vancouver. Dan returns and gets ready to confess to Jessica during a romantic dinner. He asks the kids not to leave the suite under any circumstances, but of course, they don't listen to that, and they decide to enjoy their time at the place. Unfortunately, McCaffrey's men are already at the location. Dan tries to confess to Jessica, but he doesn't have enough courage. So he decides to confess to her in French, and naturally, she doesn't understand a thing. On the other side, Kyle and Nina go to the gaming lounge. Despite Nina's objection, she meets Rand. He is a Valorant player like her brother, and she becomes interested in him. Kyle gets a chance to participate in a big tournament, and even though Rand thinks their team doesn't have a chance to win, Kyle helps them win easily. Dan tries to contact the kids, but no one answers him. He decides to go back with Jessica to check on them. Jessica enters their room and sees them sleeping in their beds, and she is happy they are safe. She doesn't know they are just mannequins, and the kids are actually at the Valorant tournament. Jessica and Dan decide to make the most of their time alone, but McCaffrey's men attack them. Dan manages to get rid of 3 of them with great intelligence, but he discovers that they have captured Jessica. They threaten him to drop his weapon, or they will kill her. The man calls Dan by the name of Sean. Jessica finally discovers the truth about Dan. Dan drops his gun, but he throws a knife with great skill and gets rid of the criminal. Jessica goes to check on the kids because the criminal told him they were at the gaming tournament and would get rid of them. She actually discovers that her kids are not in their beds. Both of them go out to save their children. Jessica is very upset with Dan because he kept this truth from her. In the gaming arena, Kyle finishes the tournament as the best player. Before the celebration, Dan and Jessica arrive and quickly take them to escape. Finally, Dan confesses his true identity to them. He tells them that before he met their mother, he was a professional contract killer. But of course they laugh at him and no one believes him. Even Maxie. But seconds later, they come under fire, and then they realize he was telling the truth. Dan gets rid of the attackers with great skill under the eyes of his family. After the danger passes, they return to the hotel. Dan confesses all the details to them. He tells them he used to be one of McCaffrey's men and had killed 43 people in the past. The family is angry at Dan because he was a hypocrite. He used to ban Kyle from gaming, claiming it was violent, even though he is violent in real life. But he doesn't seem to care about their words right now. He gives them the new IDs, but they refuse them. Even Jessica decides to abandon him, along with the kids. She calls Gwen and asks for her help, because she works at a travel agency. The next day, they leave the hotel. Even though Dan warns them that this is dangerous, they leave him and walk away. Jessica arrives at the airport. She finds that Gwen has come to meet her personally in a private jet. During the flight, Jessica asks her about her life. Gwen says she used to love a man, but he abandoned her, got married, and started a happy family. That's why she decided to get to know his wife and gain her trust until she could trap her. Jessica realizes that she is talking about her, and when she tries to get out, she finds McCaffrey standing right in front of her. McCaffrey kidnaps the family and calls Dan to surrender. Dan goes to meet him at an isolated hotel. McCaffrey's men are spread all over the place. Dan meets McCaffrey, and here we discover the shock. McCaffrey is actually Dan's father. McCaffrey wanted to kill Dan because he abandoned him. But recently, Dan killed all the assassins he sent, and that's when McCaffrey felt proud of his son. That is why he wants him to return to work with him. If he agrees, his family will return to their lives normally, but without him ever contacting them again. And if he refuses the offer, he will kill them all. Without any other choice, Dan accepts the offer. McCaffrey's assistant takes them to the airport, but in the elevator, Jessica and the kids decide to help Dan. Jessica changes Maxie's diaper, shoves it into the assistant's face, and throws him from the highest point. The family goes back to free Dan, but in reality, he has already succeeded in tricking Gwen and freeing himself. He apologizes to them for deceiving them all these years. The tech expert in McCaffrey's gang is a fan of Kyle. He helps him use a drone to locate the gang. Kyle guides Dan to take out the gang members one by one. During this time, Gwen wakes up and tries to kill Jessica and the kids. Jessica tries to apply her kickboxing lessons, but Gwen overpowers her. Dan finally eliminates the gang members, but McCaffrey strikes him. Before he can kill him, Dan manages to get the gun, and they enter into a hand-to-hand fight. We return to the cat fight. Gwen throws Jessica to the lower floor. Even though Jessica tries to use a bamboo pole to climb back up, she fails miserably. This time, she tries again, but she doesn't try to jump. She throws the wood right into Gwen's chest and finishes her off. McCaffrey gets the upper hand on Dan again and is about to kill him. But Nina talks to him as a member of the family. She starts crying to influence him. McCaffrey tells her that her speech didn't affect him, but she confesses to him that she was just buying some time for Dan to take him down. And that's exactly what happened. Finally, Dan and his family get out safely after the police arrive at the scene. 6 months later, Nina becomes a famous journalist after her report on McCaffrey. Dan starts a security company and teaches people martial arts. Jessica becomes a fitness trainer, and Kyle returns to his gaming life again. In the end, we see the family getting ready to go out on a new trip. And as usual, they leave their mobile phones behind. And that is where our movie ends.